Georgia dominates Tennessee 38-10 in Knoxville, extending its school record for victories to 28. I'm joined by our features writer, Gabe Burns. Gabe, how good is this Georgia team playing at this point in this season?
This is when you want to be at your best, right? You look at what they did to Ole Miss, you look at what they did today in a hostile environment, and I mean, they've passed really. I know we nitpick this team, some of these slow starts. It's not the same team as a couple of years, these past couple of years. But man, I mean, they're still better than everybody else. And so when you look ahead, like no offense to Georgia Tech, but as we look ahead to Alabama, I mean, this team is really rolling just how you'd want them to be.
It seems like we've said this year, maybe this Georgia team isn't as dominant as the Georgia teams of the past, but you make a good point that it's all relative, because if no one can beat them, and at least hasn't yet, does that even necessarily matter where you slide there? Carson Beck, 3 touchdowns, almost 300 passing yards. How have you seen him hit his stride?
He just, we talked about this in Jacksonville too. He just keeps getting better. And it sounds like such a cliche, right? But I mean, look at the zip that's on some of these throws. Look at the touch, look at the placement. And you start to hear these NFL draft buzz. Like I'm writing that, I mean, frankly, the biggest concern with Beck right now is he going to be here next year? Because he might wind up leaving after all because his stock just keeps going up. Is he going to be a Heisman finalist? There's a lot of guys. I thought Kirby made a really good point when he was talking about Georgia knows it doesn't typically need 40 points to win a game. It allows them to manage a game differently with Carson as opposed to some of these teams, the Oregons, the Washingtons, USC, these teams that have these quarterbacks that are competing for Heismans. Their quarterbacks, their defenses are just not anywhere close to Georgia. So it really impacts how Georgia manages the game. And so ultimately we'll see how that factors into Beck's Heisman candidacy.
Georgia goes 9 for 13 on third down. Tennessee goes 2 for 11. Georgia is the best team in the country on third down. And that's really when you want to be at your best. How crazy is that stat to think of?
It's insane. And we go back to everyone questioning the Mike Bobo hire. People wanted to question
Right.
Bobo early in the year, and it was a little rocky those first few weeks, right?
Rocky top.
Yeah, rocky flop. It was a little rough in the early going, but man, I mean, they are rolling, and we saw him break out a play that Todd Monken used today too. So this offense, it's really just gelling, and third down success is not one guy. It's not just Carson. It's not just obviously Brock. It's not just, but it's a collective thing, and Georgia deserves a ton of credit because that's about as crazy a stat as you will find.
Georgia always seems to have a skill guy who can have a breakout game. Tonight, that guy was Dylan Bell. He caught a touchdown pass. He threw a touchdown pass. He had a good return. He really was everywhere. And Ladd McConkey had tweaked his ankle and couldn't go. Does it feel like there's just always someone waiting in the wings at Georgia to kind of have their time to shine?
When you keep racking up top recruiting classes, that's going to be the case, right? So that Brock went down, people were worried about how this team would look. They look great. And now, he's back. If you have, if Ladd has to come out, if he's injured, there's just so many options. Makes Beck's job a lot easier. Certainly helps Bobo. I mean, this really is, you look at this and you look at the Bama dynasty, there's a lot of comparables. And we're really at the point that this team, I mean, we'll see how this year ends, but there's a real chance that, I mean, we are obviously looking at Alabama 2.0, but with the way this thing is they're just churning out talent, it's probably not going to end anytime soon.
Obviously, Georgia still has to face Georgia Tech, and you don't want to lose that game. You don't want to have any kind of letdown when you're on such a roll like this. But we already know that Georgia will play Alabama in the SEC championship, so it's fair to talk about that. At this point in the season, really nobody wants to play Alabama either. How do you see these two teams comparing or clashing?
It's going to be fascinating because Jalen Milroe has really become a good player. And that was a big question for Alabama early in the year was you're looking at it, how does this team not have a quarterback? Jalen just, again, it's kind of like Carson, which is going to be a fascinating dynamic. It's two guys who just have really made just huge improvements throughout the year. I don't think Bama's skill guys are up to Georgia, but they do have guys that are making plays. They do have a bunch of NFL talent on defense, and obviously you have Saban and company. These teams are pretty close, and I think it's going to be a really close game. Right now, again, neither of these teams have lost an SEC game. Texas isn't an SEC team until next year, so we can get by saying that about Bama.
We'll see if Georgia can finish another regular season perfect when they face the Yellow Jackets. Thanks to all of you for watching. Make sure you go to ajc.com or subscribe to our YouTube channel to find more videos just like this one.